It all started a few weeks ago when my girlfriend, Emma, and I decided to spend the weekend at a cabin in the woods. We both needed a break from the stress of work, and I thought a quiet, remote retreat would be the perfect way to unwind. I wasn't wrong, but what happened during that trip ended up being something I'll never forget, and not for the reasons I expected. I'm usually the responsible one in our relationship. I'm the guy who makes sure everything is planned out, checks the weather forecast, packs the bags, and makes sure we have enough supplies for a weekend in the wilderness. Emma, on the other hand, is more spontaneous, a bit flighty, but in the best way possible. She's the kind of person who can make a trip to the grocery store an adventure. So when we were deciding on the cabin, I took the reins, found one on a secluded property in the woods, and booked it. The cabin was charming. It had an old-school vibe with wood paneling, a fireplace, and windows that looked out over the forest. The perfect spot for a relaxing weekend. We were both excited when we arrived. Emma immediately started making jokes about how we were off the grid and could survive a zombie apocalypse in this place, which was something she always said whenever we did something even remotely outdoorsy. I said about lighting the fireplace while she explored the grounds. After we got settled in, we started to kick back and enjoy the peace and quiet. We made dinner, opened a bottle of wine, and just relaxed. I was feeling good, finally away from emails and work calls. After a couple of glasses of wine, we decided to take a walk around the property. The stars were out, and everything felt perfect. The only sound was the rustling of the trees and our footsteps on the dry leaves. At some point during the walk, Emma started to act a little strange. She kept looking over her shoulder, and I noticed she was visibly uncomfortable. I asked her if something was wrong, but she just laughed it off and said she was fine. Still, I couldn't help but feel a little uneasy myself. It wasn't like I was afraid of the dark, but being out in the woods, far from civilization, and hearing the occasional snap of a twig underfoot was unsettling. We eventually made our way back to the cabin, and I noticed that Emma seemed even more off. She was acting distracted, her eyes darting around the room as if she was looking for something, but there was nothing unusual. I tried to brush it off and suggested we play some board games, which is what we usually do when we have a quiet night together. But Emma didn't seem interested. By now, I was getting a little annoyed. I couldn't figure out what was going on with her. We had come out here to relax, and she was acting weird. I jokingly asked if she had seen a ghost or something, and she gave me a strange look, almost like she had. That's when things took a turn. Emma suddenly asked if I had locked all the doors and windows before we left for our walk. I told her I had, and we were good to go. But she kept pressing the issue. "Are you sure?" "I mean, like, really sure?" she asked. Now, I was getting a bit more concerned. I mean, we were in the middle of nowhere. Who would even come out here? "Emma, relax. We're fine. No one is out here. It's just us," I assured her. She looked at me with wide eyes and said something I'll never forget. "Do you hear that?" I froze. I listened. At first, I didn't hear anything, but then I heard it. A faint rustling sound coming from outside. I tried to convince myself it was just the wind, but it sounded too deliberate. Too human. I stood up, grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer, and headed toward the door. Emma tried to stop me, but I shrugged her off. If it was just an animal, we'd be fine. But if it was something else, well, I wasn't about to let my girlfriend think she was crazy. I opened the door cautiously, shining the flashlight out into the dark. I scanned the area around the cabin, but there was nothing. No movement. No figures. Nothing but trees and the occasional creak of wood. I took a deep breath and laughed it off, turning back to Emma. "You're imagining things," I said. But Emma was staring at me, her face pale. "Then why is the shed door open?" My heart sank. I hadn't noticed before, but the old wooden shed at the back of the property, an eyesore we had both avoided, was wide open. I knew for a fact I had closed it when we first arrived. Now, we were both freaked out. I tried to stay calm, but my mind was racing. What the hell could it be? Someone must have gotten into the shed somehow. I grabbed the biggest kitchen knife I could find, thinking I'd at least feel more secure with it in my hand. Emma clung to me, clearly terrified. We slowly made our way to the shed. Every step felt like an eternity, and with every passing second, the sound of the rustling continued. I pointed the flashlight at the door, revealing its interior. But there was nothing inside. Nothing except a few old gardening tools and bags of soil. I let out a long breath, relieved but still on edge. But as I was about to turn around, I heard something that made my blood run cold. A loud, unmistakable thud came from the roof of the shed. I whipped the flashlight up, but saw nothing. Emma screamed. I turned just in time to see her darting back toward the cabin, her footsteps echoing in the night. Without thinking, I chased after her. My mind was racing, what the hell was going on? But when I reached the porch, Emma was already inside, locking the door behind her. I wasn't sure what happened next. Maybe it was the wine, or maybe the adrenaline, but the next few hours were a blur. We huddled in the cabin, too scared to do anything except sit in silence. Eventually, we fell asleep, but neither of us got much rest. Every creak of the house, every gust of wind, sent us into a panic. The next morning, we packed up and left as quickly as we could. I've never been so happy to leave a place in my life. The whole drive back, Emma and I barely spoke. I think we were both trying to process what had happened. When we got home, I did some research. The cabin was on a private piece of land, and it turns out the area had a bit of a history. Years ago, there had been reports of strange happenings, disappearances, unexplained noises, and people feeling like they were being watched. I can't say if any of it was true, but after what we experienced, I'm not sure I care to know. So, yeah. That's my TIFU. I'm never staying in a cabin in the woods again. It might be safe for some people, but not for me. The whole trip has left me with more questions than answers, and I can't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was out there watching us. Never again. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments, I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. TIFU by accidentally getting hired at a funeral home because I thought it was a haunted house attraction, so this happened a few months ago, but I'm only now coming to terms with the level of stupidity I reached that day. For context, I was unemployed, broke, and desperate to find work after quitting my retail job due to philosophical differences with my manager, who thought employees didn't need lunch breaks if they were just standing at the register. I was scrolling through Craigslist, yes, I know, mistake number one, when I came across a listing titled Help Wanted, Evening Shift, Part-Time. Must be okay with the dark. Costumes provided. The ad had a vaguely spooky vibe and included phrases like must be comfortable around silence, unexpected noises, and the occasional scream, and a passion for creating immersive experiences is a plus. Naturally, my brain decided, haunted house. It was October, after all, and I thought, hey, I can scream at teenagers for minimum wage in a Freddy Krueger mask. Easy money. I show up at the address a few days later. It's this old Victorian-style house on the edge of town. It definitely looked haunted. There was even fog on the lawn. Granted, it was just early morning dew and poor landscaping, but the vibe was perfect. I knock, and this older woman in all black opens the door. She looks like she just stepped out of a 19th century funeral portrait, and in my head, I'm thinking, wow, they really commit to the aesthetic. She greets me with a calm, almost somber voice and asks if I'm here about the job. I nod enthusiastically. She doesn't say much, just hands me a black button-up shirt, slacks, and a name tag with E. Harris printed on it. Now, I don't know what the hell I was expecting, maybe a costume of a zombie or ghoul, but I thought this was just their way of assigning character names or something. I figured Harris was like some long-dead spirit I'd be portraying. Method acting or something. She gives me a brief tour of the house. It's dimly lit, with polished wood everywhere, velvet curtains, and old-timey portraits on the walls. Honestly, it was spooky enough without trying. She shows me the viewing room, which has pews, flowers, and a casket in the center. I say, wow, this set is incredible. Super realistic. She gives me a look. I realize now it was the "are you mentally okay" look, but back then I thought she was just really impressed with my enthusiasm. I'm told my job is to stand by the entrance, hand out pamphlets, and direct guests to the viewing room. Easy enough, right? I assume I'm just a morning usher character in this haunted house narrative. I figure people will walk in, get a creepy monologue from the lady in black, and then maybe the casket will pop open and someone will jump out screaming. So the first guests arrive. Middle-aged woman, clearly emotional. I hand her a pamphlet and say, "Welcome to your final destination." She stares at me. Her eyes widen. Her husband kind of squints like he's trying to figure out if I'm being edgy or just a jackass. I wink, thinking I'm nailing the spooky vibe. They walk in silently. More people arrive. A man in a suit. A woman holding a tissue to her face. A group of quiet teenagers. I greet each of them with lines like "he waits for you in the beyond," or "don't stray too far from the light," all in this creepy monotone. At one point, I even whispered to a little boy, "He can hear your thoughts." The kid looked absolutely traumatized. About 45 minutes in, the woman who hired me pulls me aside and very calmly asks what the hell I think I'm doing. I tell her I'm staying in character. She tells me this is a funeral. A real, actual funeral. For a man named Edward Harris. The name tag was not a character name. I had spent nearly an hour theatrically tormenting a grieving family attending the wake of their deceased grandfather. I try to explain that I thought this was a haunted house gig. She stares at me with the intensity of 1,000 suns and tells me to leave immediately. I bolt out of there like the literal ghost of Mr. Harris is chasing me. And that would be where this story ends, except, a few days later, I get a call from an unknown number. It's the woman again. I immediately start apologizing, ready to fake cry if needed. But to my absolute horror, she says the family thought it was a very modern, interpretive way of showing that death is not to be feared. Apparently, some of them thought I was part of the funeral home's avant-garde grief therapy. The little boy I whispered to? His mom said he hadn't stopped thinking about the spirit man and asked if he could come back to learn from him. They offered me a job. A real one. As a grief assistant or something. The pay wasn't bad, and honestly, I was broke, so I said yes. Now, I work part-time at a funeral home, handing out tissues, comforting families, and occasionally guiding kids through the emotional complexities of loss, all because I thought I was getting paid to jump out of coffins and yell boo. Death works in mysterious ways, I guess. TIFU by accidentally becoming the star of a funeral I wasn't invited to. This happened last weekend, and I'm still trying to process it. So, I work remotely in tech and moved to a new city about 2 months ago. I don't know many people here, but I'm doing my best to get out, go on walks, and explore my new surroundings. One of the few people I've met is this older gentleman named Richard who walks his dog, a massive, floppy golden retriever named Bingo, near the same park trail I use every morning. We struck up a routine of nodding, then chatting, then laughing together about the weirdos you meet in city parks. He had grandpa energy and called me kid even though I'm 30. It was nice. We weren't close, but I looked forward to seeing him. He reminded me of my late grandpa, so I guess I attached a bit emotionally. Last week, I noticed he and Bingo didn't show up for a few days. Then a small flyer appeared on a nearby community board with a photo of Bingo, and underneath it, Richard. The caption read in loving memory of Richard T. Celebration of life this Saturday at 2 p.m., Willow Creek Chapel. I was shocked. Genuinely sadder than I expected. I had no idea what had happened, but I felt compelled to go. Not because I was family or anything, but I thought it'd be nice to pay my respects. Bring some closure. Say goodbye to a man who, in a small but meaningful way, had made my mornings better. Saturday comes. I shower, dress up in the only formal wear I own, a navy suit I last wore to a job interview 3 years ago, and drive to Willow Creek. The parking lot is full, which surprises me. I grab the small bouquet of daisies I picked up and head inside. The chapel is absolutely packed. Like, standing room only packed. I manage to snag a seat in the back and settle in, daisies on my lap. There's a slideshow of photos showing Richard over the years, as a young man in the Navy, dancing with a woman I assume was his wife, holding a newborn, feeding Bingo a waffle cone. It's weird to see someone's entire life condensed into a slideshow. It makes you realize how little of someone you actually know. Then a woman walks up to the front. She looks like she's barely holding it together and introduces herself as Richard's daughter. She starts talking about how her dad lived a quiet life full of small kindnesses. About how he always made time for strangers and never met a person he couldn't make smile. Then, she points directly at me. I don't know if he's here, but my dad used to tell me about a young man he met on his walks. Said he reminded him of his grandson. Always asked him how his day was. Always laughed at his jokes. Dad said that young man made him feel seen again. Suddenly, every eye in the chapel turns. People start whispering. I feel a tap on my shoulder. You're the kid from the park, aren't you? I nod, completely caught off guard. The daughter beams. Would you mind coming up to say a few words? I panic. I freeze. My brain is screaming at me to run, but my stupid, grief-numbed body stands up and walks to the front. Now I'm at the podium. Hundreds of people are staring at me. I barely knew this man. We shared park banter and dog stories. But now I'm the mysterious, possibly spiritually adopted grandson. I open my mouth and begin rambling about Bingo licking my coffee once and how Richard thought the squirrels were conspiring against him. I hear scattered chuckles, a few sniffles. I say something like he was one of the good ones and wrap it up before I start crying out of pure anxiety. People applaud. Applaud. One woman hugs me on the way down. A man slips something into my hand, a small card that says thank you for being part of our father's final season. I sit down, overwhelmed and emotionally fried. I think it's over. Oh no. After the ceremony, there's a reception. Tables of food. A slideshow looping again. I try to sneak out, but someone calls my name. Richard's daughter. She invites me to join the family table. What do I say? No. So I sit. They pass me a plate. Ask me about work. About my family. I improvise gently, trying not to give away the fact that I was, in fact, not close to their father. A man named Uncle Todd pours me a scotch and starts telling me about his bowel surgery. Here's the kicker. Halfway through the meal, this petite woman walks in, visibly confused. She's holding a dog leash. On the other end is Bingo. Very much alive. Tongue out, tail wagging. Everyone gasps. A fork drops. Someone mutters, "What the hell?" Turns out, this is a different Richard T., from the same neighborhood. The flyer was for the other Richard T., whose family had used a public photo of him walking a golden retriever, but not Bingo. Just a similar-looking golden retriever. My Richard? Still alive. He'd gone out of town for a few days to visit his sister in Oregon. His phone had died. I am sitting at a dead stranger's funeral. I just gave a heartfelt speech. I'm wearing the dead man's name like a second skin. The entire family has been pouring their grief into me. And now they know. At first, there's silence. Then, laughter. A little awkward, a little sad, but mostly genuine. The daughter hugs me again, tighter this time, and thanks me for being so kind to Annie Richard. She says her dad would have loved me too. I offer to leave, but they insist I stay. By the end of the night, I'm drunk on funeral scotch and playing cornhole in the chapel parking lot with 3 of Richard the deceased's grandkids. This morning, I walked the trail. Richard, mine, was back. Bingo tackled me. I told him what happened, and he burst out laughing, said, "Guess I got a sneak preview." So yeah. TIFU by crashing a funeral, impersonating a grieving friend, and somehow becoming the MVP of a dead guy's life I didn't know. But hey, at least I made someone's day. TIFU by pretending to be my girlfriend's dog's therapist, so this happened a few months ago, and I still get cold sweats thinking about it. My girlfriend, let's call her Emily, and I have been dating for just over a year. Things were going great, we met through mutual friends, we clicked right away, and we share a love for sarcastic humor and late-night taco runs. The one wrinkle in the relationship is that Emily has this small, overly pampered Pomeranian named Waffles. Waffles is not just a dog. Waffles is a fur baby, a sensitive soul, and apparently a Sagittarius with trauma. Waffles goes to daycare 3 times a week, has a personalized raw food diet, gets quarterly massages, and, yes, this is not a joke, has a therapist. A dog therapist. Now, I'm not against loving your pets. I love dogs. But when she told me that she Skypes weekly with a woman named Dr. Belinda who specializes in canine cognitive behavioral therapy, I thought she was joking. She wasn't. Every Sunday at 3 p.m., she sits Waffles down in front of her iPad, opens Zoom, and speaks to the therapist on behalf of Waffles. It's not even just, he seems anxious lately. No. She role-plays as Waffles. Like, in a tiny voice, she says, "Hi Dr. B, I'm still having trust issues since that mean man in the park yelled at me." And the therapist responds seriously, prescribing affirmations and suggesting aromatherapy oils. I sat through one of these sessions, and I genuinely thought I was on some weird reality TV prank show. So here's where I ***** up. Emily had to leave town for a weekend, her best friend's bachelorette party. She was nervous about leaving Waffles with me, but I reassured her that I would take excellent care of her baby. That Friday, she left, and I was alone with a 4-pound diva dog and a Google Doc of instructions so detailed it could be confused with a nuclear launch manual. Sunday came. 3 p.m. dog therapy time. Now, I could have just skipped it. But Emily, before leaving, had made it very clear that this session was crucial. Waffles has made so much progress, and Dr. Belinda wants to assess how he's adapting to new environments without me around. She even set the iPad up for me with reminders and a preloaded Zoom link. So I had an idea. A stupid, glorious, idiotic idea. What if I pretended to be Waffles? Not via tiny voice like Emily does. No. I'd pretend to be myself, but as if I were speaking for Waffles in a more dramatic, human therapy kind of way. I thought it would be hilarious. I assumed the therapist would either go along with it or laugh and call me out. I joined the call. The screen lit up. Dr. Belinda, a calm-looking woman with an indoor plant jungle behind her, smiled warmly. "Hi, is this Waffles?" she asked. I smiled and said, "No, this is Jack, Emily's boyfriend. I'll be handling Waffles' session today." "Oh," she blinked, surprised. "That's unusual, but okay. How has Waffles been?" This was my moment. "Well," I began, sighing dramatically, "he's been experiencing some existential dread." There was a pause. She tilted her head. "Go on?" I leaned into it. I made up an entire narrative where Waffles had been struggling with the meaning of his existence, questioning why he had to chase balls and whether his tail was a symbol of unattainable happiness. I even gave him a backstory involving a squirrel he had loved and lost in the park. I did it with a straight face. I was dead serious, fully channeling my inner thespian. Dr. Belinda remained remarkably composed. At one point, I said, "He stood by the window yesterday and stared out for 45 minutes. I think he's wondering why Emily hasn't taught him Spanish yet." She nodded thoughtfully. "He's feeling intellectually unstimulated." "Yes," I said. "That's exactly it." We went on for a full 28 minutes. I even mimed little head tilts and whimpers. At the end, she said, "This has been very enlightening." "Thank you, Jack. I'll send Emily some notes. Please give Waffles a grounding cuddle and let him know he's loved." I ended the call, went into the kitchen, laughed until I nearly choked on a tortilla chip, and thought that was the end of it. No. Monday evening. Emily's back. Waffles is thrilled. She gives me a kiss and says, "Thank you so much for everything this weekend. Oh, and thank you for joining Waffles' session." Dr. Belinda emailed me her notes. My stomach dropped. "Yeah?" I said, playing dumb. She said you were very insightful. That you showed a deep understanding of Waffles' emotional landscape. She's actually asked if you'd like to co-lead sessions in the future. I stared at her. She also sent me the recording. Said it was one of the most profound breakthroughs Waffles has had. I could feel every molecule in my body freeze. She what? Emily pulled out her phone. "Do you want to watch it?" She highlighted a part where you said something really beautiful about Waffles' tail being a symbol for hope. She tapped play. My voice came out of the speakers, saying, in full-on theater student gravitas, "Sometimes I think he chases his tail not to catch it, but to remind himself that not all pursuits require an end." Emily gasped. "Jack, that's actually beautiful." I could not admit the truth. I nodded, slowly, like a monk hearing his own sermon. "Thank you. I've been thinking a lot." She hugged me and whispered, "You really get him." Since then, I have co-led 2 more sessions. Dr. Belinda now refers to me as a partner in Waffles' healing journey. I've had to read articles on dog psychology to maintain the illusion. I have post-it notes in my kitchen that say things like mention his sensitivity to sudden sounds and call back to the squirrel story. I live in fear of being exposed. I am in too deep. My girlfriend now wants to write a blog about how therapy has helped not just Waffles, but our relationship. She wants me to co-author it. So yeah. That's how I accidentally became a certified dog whisperer and amateur philosopher. All because I thought pretending to be a dog's existential crisis would be funny. It was. But now it's my life. Send help. TIFU by trying to surprise my girlfriend with a romantic dinner and accidentally getting locked out of my apartment in nothing but a bath towel. So this happened last Saturday, and I'm still living down the embarrassment. My girlfriend, Emma, and I have been dating for about a year. She works crazy hours as a nurse, and I wanted to do something nice for her on her one rare Saturday off. I thought, why not cook a fancy dinner, clean the place, light some candles, and just go all in on romance. I spent the entire day cleaning our apartment like it was about to be photographed for a catalog. I mopped, vacuumed, did laundry, even scrubbed between the stove and the wall. I watched a few Gordon Ramsay videos and decided on a pan-seared steak with garlic butter, mashed potatoes, and asparagus. Nothing too complicated, but fancy enough to impress. I even bought a bottle of wine that cost more than $12. Big spender, I know. So everything was going great. The apartment was spotless, the playlist was queued up with mellow indie love songs, and I even bought one of those ridiculously overpriced scented candles that smell like a Scandinavian forest or something. I was halfway through cooking when I decided to take a quick shower, get fresh, shave, and throw on a nice shirt and jeans before Emma arrived. Here's where things took a turn. I hopped out of the shower and wrapped myself in a towel. My clothes were laid out on the bed, but I remembered I hadn't taken the trash out, and it was bothering me. The kitchen bin was full and smelling slightly of garlic skins and raw meat, and I couldn't let that ruin the vibe. I figured I'd just run the bag down to the trash chute quickly, then get dressed and finish up dinner. My apartment building is one of those newer, minimalist design places where all the doors look the same, and the locks automatically click shut if you don't prop them open. You can probably see where this is going. Still dripping from the shower, barefoot and in nothing but a towel, I grabbed the trash bag and swung open the door. I kept my hand on the doorknob, so I thought, and made the 10-second trip to the chute at the end of the hall. Tossed the bag in, felt good about it, turned around, and saw my apartment door slowly swinging shut. I lunged like a soccer goalie trying to stop a penalty kick, but it was too late. The door clicked shut with a finality that told me I was well and truly screwed. I stood there for a moment, stunned, holding absolutely nothing, dressed like I'd just emerged from a spa. My phone? Inside. My keys? Inside. Even my glasses? On the nightstand, because why would I need them to throw out trash? Panic set in slowly. I looked down both ends of the hallway. Of course, no one was around. I tried knocking on my neighbor's door, but she didn't answer. Probably out. Or maybe just wisely ignoring the lunatic knocking while barely clothed. After a few more minutes of standing there like the world's saddest Greek statue, I realized I had two options: try to find help or somehow break into my own apartment. I went with option A. I walked to the elevator, hoping no one would get on. The elevator pinged open and, of course, two people were already inside, a guy in gym clothes and a woman holding a yoga mat. They both looked at me, then at each other, then back at me. I just nodded, clutching my towel like my life depended on it, and muttered, locked myself out. The guy chuckled and said, "Rough day, huh?" I wanted to melt through the floor. We rode down in silence, me staring at the digital numbers, counting each floor like a death knell. In the lobby, I made a beeline for the front desk, praying the concierge I usually see wasn't there. No such luck. His name's Raj, and he's a cheerful, chatty guy who now had the misfortune of seeing me half-naked and desperate. Hey Raj," I said, trying to sound casual while clearly not pulling it off. "So, funny thing. I locked myself out. Any chance you can help me get back in?" He looked me up and down and said, "You're lucky I've seen worse. Hold on." He called up to the emergency building maintenance guy since the leasing office was closed on weekends. Said it might take 20 to 30 minutes. So there I was, standing in the lobby wrapped in a towel, while residents came and went. One guy walked by with his dog, did a double take, and said, "Bold choice, man." A kid asked me if I was going swimming. I couldn't even be mad. Finally, the maintenance guy showed up. He was clearly not thrilled to be interrupted on his Saturday, but when he saw me, his irritation gave way to amusement. He didn't say much, just shook his head and followed me upstairs. Back inside, the apartment was filled with the smell of slightly overcooked garlic butter. I had left the pan on low heat, but the steak was now somewhere between well done and shoe leather. At that exact moment, my phone buzzed, Emma texting me she was on her way. I scrambled to get dressed, threw the burnt steak out, and started over as fast as I could. I managed to have everything back on track by the time she arrived, hair still damp, shirt slightly wrinkled, but apartment glowing and dinner salvaged. She walked in and looked around, impressed. "Wow," she said, "you really went all out." I smiled and said, "You have no idea." Later that night, I told her the whole story. She laughed so hard she cried, then made me promise never to take the trash out in a towel again. Now she refers to it as the towel incident, and any time she sees me with the trash, she says, "You sure you're dressed enough for that?" Moral of the story: if you ever think just a quick trip to the trash chute sounds harmless, think again. Dress first. Trash later. TIFU by pretending to be fluent in French for 3 years and getting a job that required it so. This mess has been 3 years in the making, and it finally exploded in my face last week. I'm a 28-year-old guy working in marketing, and back in 2021, I started at this mid-sized international company. During the interview, the manager asked if I spoke any other languages. I panicked. I had just read the job post more carefully the night before and noticed that French was preferred. Not required, just preferred. I took French in high school and remembered enough to awkwardly order a croissant and ask for the bathroom, but in the heat of the moment, I blurted out, "Yes, I'm fluent." I don't know why I said it. Maybe I thought it would make me look more impressive. Maybe I thought no one would ever test it. Maybe I'm just an idiot. Probably that last one. Anyway, I got the job. At first, it didn't matter. All communication was in English, and our Paris office handled all the French stuff. Occasionally an email in French would pop up, and I'd copy-paste it into Google Translate, respond in English, and everyone seemed fine with it. Once, a client from Quebec called, and I managed to stumble through a bizarre combination of oui, bonjour, and total silence until someone else jumped on the call. Crisis averted. I got really good at faking it. I downloaded French podcasts and played them loudly in the background during Zoom calls so people thought I was brushing up. I kept a tab open with Duolingo at all times. I'd nod knowingly when someone mentioned France or say stuff like, "Ah yes, the French approach to marketing is so nuanced." I was a fraud, but a careful one. Things escalated about a year ago when we landed a massive French client. Like, biggest deal the company had ever seen. They were opening an office in our city, and my manager, thinking I was fluent, said, "Perfect. You can be their primary contact while they get settled. You speak the language." I tried to deflect. I said I was rusty. He smiled and said, "That's okay. You'll pick it back up." He even approved a paid online French course for me. The irony was not lost on me. I used the course, but it wasn't enough. It was never going to be enough. When I met the French team, I immediately defaulted to English. They were polite and switched too, but occasionally would lapse into French and expect me to keep up. I'd smile, nod, and pray to every god I could think of that no one asked me to actually translate anything. It worked. 4 months. Somehow. Until last Thursday. We had a big quarterly strategy meeting. The French client's entire leadership team flew in. There were maybe 15 of us in a glass-walled conference room on the 21st floor, all the big wigs. Someone suggests we go around and say a few words about the collaboration so far. The French CEO, very charming and very French, says he'll start. He gives this lovely little speech in French about how excited they are, how well things are going, how impressed they are with the partnership. Then he turns to me and says, "Et-vous, tu en pensez-vous? Vous êtes notre ligne ici. Dites nous ce que vous ressentez." And everyone turns and looks at me. I panic. I understand maybe 60% of what he said. Something about what I think, how I feel, me being the link between the two companies. I'm sweating. My vision goes blurry. My brain screams run. Instead, I smile and nod. Then I say, "Oui, je pense que les opportunités sont très fromage." Yes. I said the opportunities are very cheese. I meant to say something like très bon or très excitant or literally any other adjective. But in my frantic search for a French word that wasn't bonjour, I said the first noun I could remember from high school. Fromage. Cheese. There was a silence. A long one. Like, long enough for me to feel every pore on my body open out of shame. One of the French guys actually said, "Pardon," and tried not to laugh. The CEO smiled, bless him, and said, "Say, interessant," and gently moved on. The rest of the meeting was in English, but the damage was done. I could feel it. Everyone knew. After the meeting, my manager pulled me aside. I was expecting to be fired on the spot. But he just looked confused. "Dude, do you actually speak French?" I finally confessed. Everything. From the lie in the interview to the Duolingo tabs and podcast theater. He just stared at me for a full 30 seconds and then said, "Man, I don't even know what to do with this. But you sure as hell aren't handling French clients anymore." Somehow, I still have a job. Probably because I've been doing good work otherwise and they're already deep into this account. But the trust is gone. My nickname in the office is now Monsieur Fromage. They put a label with that name on my office door. And I deserve it. If there's a lesson here, it's don't lie on your resume. Or at least, don't lie in a way that can be immediately disproven with a single word like cheese. TIFU by pretending to be fluent in Spanish for 3 years and then getting invited to a live TV interview in Mexico. So this all started because I was trying to impress a girl. Back in college, I took 2 semesters of Spanish and honestly did okay. I could manage basic conversations and order tacos without sounding like a complete tourist. Fast forward a year and I meet this girl, let's call her Ana. She was a transfer student from Mexico, ridiculously smart, funny, and way out of my league. Naturally, I did what any dumb guy trying to seem interesting would do, I lied. When we first met, we were at a mutual friend's party, and someone mentioned that Ana spoke Spanish. I, in my infinite wisdom, replied with, "Oh, I'm fluent in Spanish too." I immediately regretted it, but Anna's face lit up and she started talking to me at a speed my Duolingo owl would cry at. I smiled, nodded, and tossed out a lot of "sí, claro," and "interesante," and somehow got through the conversation without revealing that I was, in fact, a linguistic fraud. Now, most people would stop there. Admit the lie, laugh it off, take the L. But no. Not me. I doubled down. Over the next few weeks, I used Google Translate religiously. I'd practice responses in advance, casually drop in phrases I remembered from college, and keep conversations vague and reactive. Ana and I got close. Really close. Eventually, we started dating. I always found excuses to steer conversations back into English. "I'm just tired, can we switch to English, or I've been speaking Spanish all day, I need a break." She never suspected a thing. I met her friends, her family via video calls, even attended a couple of Spanish-language student events and survived. One of her cousins even complimented me on my accent once. I think he was joking. Anyway, fast forward to 3 years later. We're out of college, both working. I work in marketing at a mid-sized startup. Ana works at a non-profit that partners with Latin American communities. Through her, I'd occasionally volunteer for events where I could get away with the same charade, smiling, nodding, memorized phrases. I should have stopped. But I didn't. I kept the lie alive. Then came the disaster. Ana's nonprofit was launching a huge education campaign in Mexico. They partnered with a TV station in Mexico City and were doing a series of interviews, features, and press events. The whole thing was bilingual. Ana had told her team about me, how her bilingual boyfriend had done amazing marketing work, and how I'd be perfect to represent the English-speaking side of the campaign in Spanish. Without asking me first. One afternoon she comes home and says, "Babe, I have amazing news. You're going to be on Televisora Nacional next week. They're doing a live segment about our campaign, and you'll talk about the international outreach." In Spanish, obviously. I think I blacked out for a second. I wanted to tell her. I really did. But 3 years of pretending had somehow cemented this false identity, and I couldn't bring myself to admit the truth. So instead, I smiled with the enthusiasm of a man being dragged to the gallows and said, "Wow, that's incredible." Cue a week of panic. I barely slept. I downloaded every Spanish podcast I could find. I watched telenovelas with subtitles. I even hired a Spanish tutor off Craigslist and pretended I was just polishing up. Every day, I rehearsed answers, wrote down talking points, and prayed that some natural disaster would cancel the interview. It didn't. The day arrived. I flew to Mexico City, met the campaign team, and sat in the green room sweating bullets. Anna was so proud, taking selfies with me, introducing me to the staff. I wanted to cry. Then they mic'd me up, walked me out to the stage, and I sat down across from the host, a middle-aged man with the warm smile of a predator sensing blood. The camera light turned red. We were live. Bienvenidos a nuestro mundo, the host said. Hoy tenemos con nosotros a un invitado especial desde los Estados Unidos, experto en marketing internacional. Daniel Carter. Applause. Smiles. Nods. Then he turned to me and asked, in rapid-fire Spanish, Cuéntanos un poco sobre cómo piensas adaptar esta campaña para que reúna con las comunidades rurales en Chiapas y Oaxaca, considerando sus tradiciones culturales únicas y su acceso limitado a tecnología. I stared at him like a deer in headlights. My mouth opened. I heard myself say, sí. The host blinked. I realized I had to say more. My brain went into overdrive. I blurted out, es muy importante usar, cultura, la tecnología no es siempre posible. Entonces, usamos cosas tradicionales, como papel. Paper. That was my strategy. Usamos papel. I felt a bead of sweat roll down my spine. The host nodded slowly, clearly confused. He tried to steer me gently. Te refieres a materials impresos como folletos, cartels. I panicked again. Sí. Cartels. Muy grandes. Con colores. Anna was watching from the side of the stage, her face slowly transforming from pride to horror. The interview continued for 6 more excruciating minutes, during which I managed to mangle basic grammar, invent words, and at one point refer to internet access as el computación de espacio. When it finally ended, there was polite applause. The host shook my hand like he was afraid I'd break if squeezed too hard. I walked off stage in a daze. Anna didn't say anything at first. We rode back to the hotel in silence. Eventually, she asked, in English, what the hell happened? I came clean. All of it. The lie from the party. The years of Google Translate. The fake conversations. The staged fluency. I apologized for everything. She stared at me. Then she laughed. Not a joyful laugh, a hysterical, you've got to be kidding me laugh. She didn't say much after that. We broke up 2 days later. I don't blame her. The interview, of course, went viral. Someone uploaded it to YouTube with the title Este Gringo Destroy el Español en Vivo. It got 500,000 views in a week. The top comment? He speaks Spanish like my cat does taxes. So yeah. TIFU by pretending to be fluent in Spanish for 3 years, getting caught on live TV, and ending a relationship built on lies. On the bright side, my Spanish has improved dramatically since then. Necessity is a hell of a teacher. TIFU by throwing a surprise party for my girlfriend and accidentally triggering a breakdown that revealed she was secretly married, so this happened last Saturday, and I'm still reeling. For some context, I, 28M, had been dating my girlfriend Lena, 27F, for about 14 months. We met at a friend's Halloween party, hit it off immediately, and things had been pretty smooth since. She was charming, clever, a bit mysterious in that old soul artist kind of way, and always kept things interesting. We didn't live together, but she stayed at my place probably 4 or 5 nights a week. I thought we were moving toward something serious. Possibly marriage. She was evasive about meeting her family, but I figured she had her reasons of estrangement, cultural stuff, whatever. I wasn't gonna pry. Lena's birthday was coming up, and I wanted to do something special. She had mentioned once that she never had a proper birthday party growing up because her parents were Jehovah's Witnesses, so I thought, why not throw her the first real birthday party of her life? I'm not the surprise party type of guy, but I thought it would be meaningful. I went all out. Got a rooftop space through a buddy of mine, hired a private chef, themed decorations. She was into 70s aesthetics, so think disco balls, lava lamps, that kind of vibe, and invited pretty much everyone I could think of, her friends, coworkers, even some mutuals from our climbing gym. I asked her roommate, Zoe, for help managing the guest list and decorations. Zoe seemed hesitant at first, but agreed. In hindsight, her hesitancy was red flag number 1. The night of the party arrives. Everyone's gathered on the rooftop. Lights are dim, people are sipping drinks, the DJ is playing Fleetwood Mac. We're waiting for Lena to show up. I had told her we were just going out to dinner, so she was dressed up but didn't suspect a thing. We walk into the venue. Lights come on. Everyone yells surprise. Confetti cannons go off. Lena freezes. Like, completely freezes. Not in a cute "oh my god I can't believe this" way. More like a deer in headlights. Her smile drops and her face goes pale. I thought she was about to faint. Everyone starts clapping and cheering, but she's just standing there. I whisper, "Hey, are you okay?" She mutters, "We need to talk," and pulls me aside to a quieter part of the rooftop. I assumed she was overwhelmed, maybe having social anxiety, which I would have completely understood. But then she drops this atomic bomb: I need to leave. I shouldn't be here. I'm still married. My first thought was, she's being metaphorical or something. I laughed. Wrong move. I'm serious, she said. I never got divorced. I thought I could just leave it all behind. Apparently, Lena had been married in another state 5 years ago. Her ex, well, technically current husband, was someone she met in college. They had a whirlwind romance, got married young, and things quickly turned sour. He became controlling, emotionally manipulative, and according to her, borderline abusive. She ran, changed cities, cut ties, and started fresh. She never officially filed for divorce. Said she couldn't afford it at the time and then just kept putting it off. She never told anyone outside a tight circle of old friends. She started crying. Hard. Like years of pent-up emotion just cracking wide open. I led her to a stairwell and sat with her while she sobbed into my shoulder for 10 straight minutes. I didn't know what to say. My mind was racing, trying to process the fact that the woman I was seriously thinking about proposing to was already married. Meanwhile, back at the party, people were starting to notice that the guest of honor had essentially vanished. Eventually, Lena stood up and said she had to go. I offered to walk her home, but she said she needed to be alone. She called a cab and left. I went back upstairs and tried to salvage the night. Gave some vague excuse about Lena not feeling well. People were confused, a little awkward, but the open bar helped smooth it over. I stayed until the end, cleaning up empty glasses and explaining to the chef that the birthday girl had a migraine. The next morning, I woke up to 11 missed calls and a long text from Lena. She was sorry. She said she had been meaning to tell me, but never found the right time. That she loved me, but understood if I never wanted to speak to her again. She said the party made her realize how deep she was into a lie, and that she couldn't keep doing it. She had already booked an appointment with a divorce attorney. I haven't responded. I've spent the last few days alternating between anger, heartbreak, and sympathy. Part of me gets it. People have pasts. People do desperate things when they're in pain. But also, how do you build a life with someone who's keeping something like that under wraps? The worst part? Everyone keeps texting me saying how amazing the party was. Best birthday ever. Lena's so lucky. You really nailed it, bro. And all I can do is smile at my phone while my stomach churns. So yeah, I threw the perfect surprise party for someone who wasn't legally single. And accidentally unraveled a 5-year-old secret in front of 50 people, a guy in a glitter jumpsuit, and a $600 disco ball rental. Moral of the story? Maybe just ask your partner straight up if they're married before planning anything with a guest list. Hey, friends! If you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. TIFU. By accidentally going on a romantic getaway with my boss's wife a few months ago, I, 29M, started a new job at a mid-sized marketing firm. It was a bit of a career reset for me after I burned out hard in my last job. This new place seemed chill, the team was cool, and the pay was decent. I was especially stoked about our quarterly employee appreciation perks. Each department got a random draw, and the winner would get a weekend getaway fully paid for, plus one guest. It was their way of boosting morale and it worked. Everyone got super hyped about it. Fast forward to last month. I win the damn draw. I'm ecstatic. It couldn't have come at a better time. Work was picking up and I'd just gotten out of a messy situationship. A weekend away from everything sounded like exactly what I needed. I got a voucher in my inbox with a destination, a cabin resort near a national park, and instructions to confirm the name of the guest I'd be bringing. I was seeing someone casually, but nothing serious, and they were busy that weekend anyway. Here's where it all starts going to hell. Earlier that week, during a meeting, I'd made small talk with the CEO's wife. I'd only met her twice, once during the holiday party and once when she dropped by the office. I didn't know her well, but I remembered she was friendly and seemed down to earth. She'd made some joke about how even the employees get better vacations than I do. I, being an idiot trying to be funny, said something like, "Hey, you can come on mine if you want." She laughed. I laughed. End of interaction. Or so I thought. 2 days later, I get a message from her on Instagram. She's like, "Hey, remember that joke about the trip? I'm actually dying for a weekend away and /husband, aka my boss, is working all weekend. If the offer's open, now," my brain should have screamed no. But instead it whispered, "She's joking, right?" So I sent back a laughing emoji and said, "Well hey, I did win the trip." That night, I get a confirmation email from the resort. I'm listed as the main guest. Guess who's listed as the +1? Yeah. I freeze. I panic. I have no idea how she even got access to the reservation system, or if she called HR, or what. I consider canceling the whole thing, but it's non-refundable and the company paid. I feel trapped. I tell myself, maybe she's just using it as a personal escape and it's not weird. She'll take her own room, we'll barely hang out, and I can hike and chill in peace. I was so very wrong. Friday comes. We meet at the train station. She's dressed like she's about to shoot an Instagram reel in the Alps. She hugs me a bit too long, calls it our little escape, and I'm internally screaming. I try to set boundaries right away, just so we're clear, I'm planning to spend most of the time hiking solo. She says, "Totally. Me too," and then never leaves my side again for 72 hours. We arrive at the cabin. It's not 2 rooms. It's one. One bed. No couch. Just a king-sized bed with heart-shaped pillows. Apparently, she called the resort and upgraded us to the honeymoon suite because it was more private. I call the front desk, ask about alternatives. Fully booked. Every cabin. The guy on the phone chuckles and says, "Don't worry, we get a lot of couples who play the platonic game at first." Night 1, I sleep on the floor using a jacket as a pillow. The next day, we go hiking. I'm trying so hard to create space, but she keeps taking selfies of us, posting them on her story with captions like "Soul Healing Weekend" and "Get you a man who makes you laugh." At one point, a couple hiking past us says, "You guys are such a cute couple." She doesn't correct them. She just smiles and says, "Thanks." I consider hiking off a cliff. That night, I give up and sleep on the bed, on the edge, stiff as a board, fully clothed. At 2 a.m., she rolls over and says, "Can I ask you something?" I say, "Sure." She whispers, "Do you ever think about quitting and starting over somewhere warm, like Costa Rica?" I pretend to be asleep. I hear her whisper me too and roll back over. Sunday, we head back. I'm exhausted, traumatized, and running low on plausible deniability. I feel like I just emotionally cheated with my boss's wife despite doing nothing except exist near her. I vow never to speak of it again. Monday comes. I walk into the office. My boss is in early, sipping coffee and scrolling on his phone. He waves me over. My heart plummets. He's seen the Instagram posts. I'm done. Fired. Cancelled. Instead, he says, "Hey, my wife said you were a great travel buddy. Said you helped her de-stress. Thanks for keeping her company. She needed that." I nod. I mumble something about fresh air and good hiking trails. He goes, "By the way, she posted one of your pics on Facebook and now my sister thinks you're her new boyfriend." We had a laugh about it. I want the floor to eat me. It's been 3 weeks. I can't look my boss in the eye. I've turned off all story notifications from his wife. I now understand the full, nuclear potential of a poorly timed joke. And every time someone at work mentions the weekend getaway program, I start sweating like a man on trial. Moral of the story? Never invite your boss's wife on a trip. Even as a joke. Especially as a joke. TIFU. By pretending I knew how to sail a boat. This happened last summer, but the emotional scars are still fresh and the group chat still hasn't let me live it down. So I, 28M, had just started dating this amazing woman, Claire, 27F. She was funny, sharp, effortlessly cool, and somehow out of my league in all the usual ways: fashion sense, travel stories, friends who actually read The Economist, etc. We met through mutual friends, and for our first month of dating, everything was going almost too well. She introduced me to her circle, and I was determined not to seem like the least interesting or competent one in the group. One of her closest friends, Drew, hosted an annual lake weekend at his family's lake house. You know the type: multiple decks, private dock, huge kitchen no one uses because everyone's too drunk off White Claws and Rose. Claire invited me, and I jumped at the chance. I figured it would be a good way to cement my place in this group of seemingly flawless humans. This was my shot to become one of the crew. We arrive on a Friday, and it's exactly what you'd imagine. Everyone's gorgeous, tanned, dressed like an ad for J.Crew summer catalog. The whole weekend is carefully chaotic in that Instagrammable way. Day drinking, lake swimming, paddleboards, joints passed around over charcuterie boards. I'm doing my best to blend in, and it seems to be working. On Saturday afternoon, someone suggests taking out the sailboat. A real, actual sailboat, not a sunfish or dinky little thing, but a 25-foot sloop docked right outside the house. Drew's dad bought it years ago and, from what I gathered, no one had taken it out in months. Someone says, "Who knows how to sail?" And before I can stop my mouth, I hear myself say, "Yeah, I've done it a few times." I need you to understand, I have never sailed a boat in my entire life. I don't know why I said it. Panic? Ego? Maybe a deeply suppressed fantasy of being a rugged sea guy? Claire looked impressed, and that sealed it. Suddenly, I'm being handed a beer and told I'm captain for the afternoon. In hindsight, the fact that everyone just went along with this was an early red flag. There were 5 of us who went: me, Claire, Drew, a guy named Mark, and Claire's friend Justine. Everyone piles in, we untie the ropes, and I start fiddling with things like I've seen in movies: pulling lines, adjusting the rudder, nodding seriously like I'm calculating wind direction. I wasn't. I steer us away from the dock with the small outboard motor, kill it, and raise the sail. Somehow, miraculously, we start moving. And for the first 15 minutes, it's perfect. The wind catches, we glide across the lake, music is playing, everyone is laughing. I'm feeling like a king. Claire leans into me and says, "You're full of surprises." I should have quit while I was ahead. We get deeper into the lake. The wind picks up. I try to tack, at least, I think that's what it's called, and I end up swinging the boom way too hard. It misses Mark's head by inches and knocks over a Yeti cooler. Everyone laughs, but it's nervous laughter. I start to realize I have no idea how to get us back. The shoreline looks farther away now, and the wind is shifting. I try to repeat the earlier moves, but nothing's working the way it did. The sail flaps uselessly. I overcompensate and send us veering in a wide circle. The rudder jams. We start drifting. I try to casually start the outboard motor again. It sputters once, then dies. I yank the cord 3 more times, nothing. Claire asks, "Is it supposed to sound like that?" I smile like I'm in control, but internally I'm sweating bullets. Then the clouds roll in. Not metaphorically, like actual gray thunderclouds. I didn't check the weather. I was too busy playing Captain Jack Sparrow. Wind picks up again, but now it's choppy and gusty. The boat starts tilting dangerously. Drinks spill, sunglasses go flying, Justine's hat vanishes into the water. Drew tries to help and asks, "What should I do?" And I snap, "Trim the jib," even though I don't know what the jib is. Turns out, we hadn't even raised the jib. We were just running on the mainsail. Drew looks at me like, "What?" I try to turn us back, but I don't understand wind angles and somehow manage to get the boat in irons, dead stopped, sails flapping, pointed directly into the wind. We sit there, rocking like a bathtub toy, totally dead in the water. Then the rain starts. Not a little drizzle, full summer downpour. The kind that pelts your skin like gravel. Everyone scrambles for cover, but there's none. Claire looks at me, mascara streaming, and says, "Are we okay?" And I say the worst thing possible, "I don't know." After about 20 minutes of rain and cold stares, we drift near a private dock on the far side of the lake. I hop into the water, bless those stupid swim trunks, and drag us the last few meters with a rope like a medieval barge mule. We tie up to the dock. Nobody says anything. Justine's teeth are chattering. Drew calls someone from the house to come get us with a jet ski. When we get back, soaked and miserable, everyone else is still sunbathing and drinking like nothing happened. We look like we've been through a storm at sea, because we kind of have. Claire doesn't say much that night. The next morning, she takes an early ride home with Justine. The group still refers to it as the shipwreck. It took Claire and me about 3 awkward dates to admit the chemistry had fizzled. She was gracious about it, even made a joke about me rescuing her from pirates, but the damage was done. The crew remains out of reach. I still get tagged every once in a while when someone in the group sees a picture of a sailboat or a guy in Sperry's. Moral of the story: if you're trying to impress someone, maybe don't lie about knowing how to operate a 4,000-pound vehicle that moves using physics and wind. TIFU by lying about knowing how to sail and ending up stranded on a yacht with my boss's wife. So this happened last summer, but I've only now felt brave enough to admit it. At the time, I was a 28-year-old IT consultant working for a mid-sized firm. My boss, Craig, was one of those guys who thought he was a hybrid of Steve Jobs and Bear Grylls. Always talking about living deliberately and pushing limits. He also happened to own a 38-foot sailboat named Serenity that he talked about constantly but rarely actually took out. One Friday afternoon at the office, Craig was yapping about how he needed to take his boat out to exercise her hull before some regatta in the fall, but none of his usual buddies were available. In a moment of temporary insanity, I blurted out, "I used to sail back in college, if you need a hand." Lie number 1. The only boat I'd ever been on was a pontoon party barge during spring break. Craig's eyes lit up. Really? What class? I panicked. J/24S mostly. And some Catalina 27s. I have no idea where I pulled those names from. Maybe from Googling types of sailboats during a boring Zoom meeting once. Anyway, that was enough for Craig. He clapped me on the back and said, "Perfect. Be at the marina at 9 a.m. tomorrow." What I didn't realize was that he wasn't coming. He had family stuff to deal with, and instead, I'd be helping his wife, Trish, take the boat out. "She just needs a hand with rigging and getting it around the bay," he said. Super chill. So now I'm showing up at this fancy marina wearing cargo shorts, boat shoes I bought at Target that morning, and the most nautical-looking polo I owned. Trish is already there. She's mid-40s, extremely fit in that scary yogi way, and wearing $500 sunglasses and a visor. She eyes me like she's trying to figure out if I'm about to sell her a timeshare. "Craig says you've got experience," she says, climbing aboard. "That's good. I'm a little rusty." "Rusty? Fantastic." So neither of us knew what the hell we were doing. We untied Serenity and motored her out of the slip. I was mostly copying what I'd seen in YouTube videos the night before. I kept muttering nautical terms under my breath to sound legit. "Sheets, tack, boom vang." Once we were out in the bay, Trish suggested raising the sails. I nodded confidently, grabbed what I thought was the halyard, and pulled. The sail halfway rose before jamming. Then something snapped. Trish yelled. I pretended to know what was happening, and before I could stop it, the boom swung around and smacked me square in the forehead. I hit the deck hard. I don't know if I blacked out, but when I opened my eyes, Trish was standing over me, holding a bag of frozen peas she had in the cooler for some reason. "You okay?" she asked, pressing the bag to my head. "Totally," I mumbled. "Part of sailing." She didn't look convinced. We eventually got the mainsail up, mostly by brute force. With a little luck and a lot of guessing, we got moving. For a moment, I felt triumphant. The wind caught, the boat leaned slightly, and we were actually sailing. That lasted about 6 minutes. Then I noticed we were drifting toward a small rocky outcropping near the eastern side of the bay. I tried to tack, but turned the rudder the wrong way. Trish started yelling. I tried to correct, overcompensated, and managed to jibe unintentionally, meaning the boom whipped around violently again. This time it hit Trish square in the shoulder. She let out a scream and dropped to the cockpit bench. I froze. She was swearing, holding her arm weirdly. Not broken, but definitely messed up. I reached for my phone to call for help. No signal. I tried the boat's radio. Dead. Trish, gritting her teeth, said, "We need to anchor. Call Craig." "I'd love to, Trish." I fumbled with the anchor, not realizing I needed to cleat it off, and dropped it too fast. It caught, but I'd let out way too much line and we drifted wildly before settling awkwardly. The boat was kind of spinning in place. Trish was in pain and definitely losing patience. She asked me to hand her a beer from the cooler. At least that I could do. We sat there, marooned in the middle of the bay. I tried to act chill, like this was a totally normal thing. Like drifting uselessly in your boss's yacht with his injured wife was just part of a Saturday vibe. After a solid 2 hours of awkward silence, I finally got a single bar of signal. I called Craig. He picked up on the second ring. "How's she handling?" "Good," I said, for reasons I still can't explain. "Couple hiccups. Your wife might have dislocated her shoulder, though." There was a long pause. "What?" Eventually, a harbor patrol boat came out to get us. Craig had called them after I hung up. They towed Serenity in while Trish sat silently in the cabin, icing her shoulder and avoiding eye contact. Back at the dock, Craig showed up. He looked at me, looked at Trish, then looked at the boat. You said you'd sailed J/24S. I nodded. He gave me the most withering stare I've ever received from a human being. You realize this is a Beneteau Oceanus 38? Totally, I said, again for reasons beyond comprehension. The next week at work was hell. Words spread fast. I was the captain now. People made boat jokes constantly. Every meeting had someone saying let's stay the course or don't rock the boat. My desktop wallpaper was replaced with a picture of Gilligan's Island. HR got involved briefly because someone renamed the office Wi-Fi to SS Mino. Needless to say, I wasn't invited to the regatta in the fall. Moral of the story, never lie about sailing, especially when your boss's yacht and wife are involved. TIFU by trying to impress my crush with a cooking dinner and ended up setting the kitchen on fire. So, I've always been the kind of guy who likes to try and do things that will make people think I'm cool, even if I don't have the skills to back it up. I know, it's dumb, but that's just who I've been. I've never been good at cooking. I've burned instant ramen, once made scrambled eggs that were more like rubber bands than food, and the closest thing to a fancy dish I've ever attempted was a grilled cheese. So, naturally, when I wanted to impress my crush, let's call her Emily, I thought, what better way to do it than cook a fancy dinner? Big mistake. Emily and I had been friends for a while, and we'd hung out a couple of times, but it had always been casual. The friendship had started growing into something a little more, but I hadn't exactly made a move yet. So, I thought this dinner thing could be my big chance to show her I could be the kind of guy who does something unexpected. You know, someone who can put in the effort, who's interesting, and who can cook a mean meal. I knew I wanted to make something impressive, but not too complicated. After a bit of Googling, I decided to make a chicken Alfredo pasta with garlic bread. Sounded simple enough, right? Well, there's a little more to it than I thought. I went to the store that afternoon, grabbed everything I needed, chicken breasts, heavy cream, butter, Parmesan, garlic, and some fancy herbs that I had no idea how to use. I also picked up some frozen garlic bread, because I figured, hey, why not? And just in case everything went wrong, I grabbed a backup frozen pizza. Gotta have a safety net, right? Back at my apartment, I started prepping. First, I had to clean up my kitchen a bit. I hadn't really used the stove much recently, so there were a few stray crumbs and grease stains I hadn't noticed. That took longer than expected, but I finally got everything wiped down, and my chicken breasts were thawing in the sink. Now, here's where things really went south. I started with the pasta, boiling water, adding salt, all that stuff. Easy, right? Meanwhile, I got my pan on the stove to cook the chicken. I'd watched enough cooking shows to know the basics: season the chicken, sear it in the pan until it's golden brown, then let it rest before slicing it up. What I didn't realize is that I had the heat on way too high. My pan was getting hotter and hotter, and I didn't notice because I was so focused on the pasta and the garlic bread. Emily was supposed to come over in about 45 minutes, so I was really trying to get everything ready quickly. The moment I put the chicken in the pan, it started to sizzle like I was cooking in an oil refinery. I thought, okay, this is fine. It's supposed to be sizzling, right? So, I left it there, walked back to the counter to check on the pasta, and then I smelled it. That unmistakable burnt scent. It was the chicken, blackening in the pan. But I didn't panic. Not yet. I grabbed the tongs, flipped the chicken, and put the pan down to lower the heat. At least I'd saved it, right? But no. The damage was done. That pan was practically smoking at this point, and I hadn't even gotten to the sauce yet. I quickly moved the chicken to a plate and started making the Alfredo sauce. I melted butter, added garlic, then poured in the heavy cream. But here's the thing I didn't know: you're supposed to keep the heat low when making a cream sauce. Instead, I cranked the burner up high, hoping to speed up the process. Bad move. The sauce immediately started to splatter all over the stove, and I ended up with a mess. But I wasn't done yet. The final insult to injury came when I put the garlic bread in the oven. I thought, hey, it's frozen, how bad could it be? I set the oven to 375 degrees Fahrenheit and set a timer for 10 minutes. Well, about 5 minutes in, I smelled something burning. But, like the chicken, I figured it was just the garlic bread getting that crispy edge, right? I went back to my sauce, added some Parmesan, and stirred it in, thinking I was finally getting things under control. Then, I heard it. A strange, high-pitched beeping. I turned around and saw the smoke detector going off. At this point, I wasn't even surprised. Smoke was pouring out of the oven, and the kitchen was filling up with this thick, acrid smell. I opened the oven door, and to my horror, the garlic bread wasn't just crispy. It was charcoal black, and the edges were bubbling like they were about to ignite. The entire kitchen was filled with smoke, and the pan where I had cooked the chicken? It had caught fire. A small flame was licking at the edge of the pan, barely visible in the dim kitchen light. Panic set in. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find, some old dish towels, and tried to swat at the flames, which was, in hindsight, probably the dumbest thing I could have done. The flames just got bigger, and that's when I remembered something crucial: you're supposed to use salt, not towels, to put out a grease fire. Emily was supposed to be here in 15 minutes. I had no time. I did what any rational person would do. I grabbed my phone and called 911. I need help. There's a fire in my kitchen, I don't know what I'm doing. While I was on the phone with the fire department, the fire alarm was wailing, and I had my windows open to try and air out the kitchen. I grabbed a bottle of wine, because why not, and poured myself a glass to calm my nerves. I knew I had to play it cool when Emily walked in, but I wasn't sure how I was going to explain why there was a fire truck outside my apartment. Long story short, the fire department came, and after a quick inspection, they told me everything was fine, but I would need to clean up the kitchen and fix my pan. They also gave me some advice on fire safety, which, honestly, I had never thought about before. As for Emily, she showed up a little later than planned, and I had to tell her the dinner was not going as planned. She was surprisingly understanding, and we ended up ordering pizza together while I aired out the apartment. I tried to salvage the situation by saying, hey, at least we'll have a great story to tell. She laughed, and the night ended on a better note than I expected. But now, every time I think about trying to impress someone, I remember the time I nearly burned my apartment down in a desperate attempt to cook an Alfredo dinner. So yeah, that's my TIFU. TIFU by accidentally sending a very embarrassing text to my boss while trying to sext my girlfriend. Let me set the scene. It was a Thursday evening, and I was sitting at my desk in my office at home, working through some emails. I had been in a long-distance relationship with my girlfriend for about 6 months, and we were starting to get a little more frisky in our text conversations. It was pretty much our go-to way to keep the spark alive. Now, normally, I'm very careful about my texts. I double-check who I'm sending messages to, especially in a professional setting. But this time, I made the fatal mistake of getting a little too careless. You see, my girlfriend and I had been joking around about how bad we both were at texting without autocorrect messing things up. So, we decided to send each other one of those sexting challenge texts where you intentionally misspell words or use weird phrases to get a reaction. The idea was to make it fun and laugh at how ridiculous it was. So, naturally, I was in the middle of sending her some very suggestive text messages, all in good fun, when I got distracted by work. My boss, let's call him Tim, had sent me an urgent email about a project update that needed to be reviewed. Tim is a great guy, always laid back but very professional when it comes to work. I didn't want to keep him waiting, so I opened the email on my phone, responded quickly, and started typing my reply to him. Here's where the disaster begins. At the same time, my girlfriend sent me one of her challenge texts, and without thinking, I opened it, laughed, and decided to respond, mid-typing to Tim's email. I was so deep into the moment with my girlfriend, and I honestly wasn't paying attention. I typed out a response that was meant for her, not Tim. I'll spare you the explicit details, but it was something, well, inappropriate for a professional email. I hit send without even thinking twice. Then, almost immediately, I realized what I had done. My heart stopped. My phone buzzed a moment later. It was a reply from Tim. He said, "Interesting email, glad to see you're so passionate about the project." I was expecting a bit more professionalism though. "I'll just assume it was meant for someone else, and we can talk about this tomorrow." I froze. I reread the message I sent him, and sure enough, there it was, crystal clear. "Let's get down to business tonight, make it dirty," and other equally awful, cringeworthy lines were sprinkled throughout. This was not only unprofessional, it was downright embarrassing. I immediately tried to call Tim to apologize, but he wasn't answering. I texted him profusely, swearing that it was meant for my girlfriend and that I had been distracted by a silly text exchange. But it was too late. I had already dug myself into a massive hole. By the time Tim finally responded hours later, he had apparently forwarded the email to HR, with a note saying, "Not sure if this is a joke, but we need to discuss this first thing in the morning." Now, my stomach was in full-blown knots. My brain was running through every possible worst-case scenario, losing my job, getting suspended, or worse, getting fired. The fact that I had sexted my boss by accident was beyond mortifying. It wasn't just a casual text either, it was explicit. When I finally managed to get a hold of Tim the next morning, I was ready to face the music. He answered with a stern tone, which made my blood run cold. "We need to talk. This is a bit odd." I explained the entire situation to him, from the sexting challenge to my accidental message, and how it wasn't meant for him. I could hear him stifling a laugh on the other end, which, to be honest, was a bit of a relief. He didn't seem angry, but the whole situation was incredibly awkward. He even joked, "At least I now know what you really think about our upcoming project meeting." But then, the bombshell dropped. He told me he had already spoken with HR, and we had to go through a formal meeting that afternoon to discuss what happened. HR called me in, and I felt like I was walking into a courtroom, facing my fate. I tried to play it cool, but inside, I was dying. The HR person was surprisingly kind about it. She said it was a simple mistake, one that anyone could make, especially in the context of how informal texting culture had become. However, I would have to sign a formal apology letter to Tim, and I would also have to attend a professional communication workshop. She also stressed that I needed to be very careful with texting on work devices and emails. In the end, I didn't lose my job, but I learned a valuable lesson: always double-check your recipients, and never get too distracted by a sexting challenge when you're supposed to be working. The entire situation was utterly mortifying, and I now feel like I've somehow become the office legend, for all the wrong reasons. I had to endure endless teasing from coworkers for the next few weeks. Every time I sent an email, someone would make a comment about making sure it wasn't a sext. And whenever I would bring up a project, someone would say, "Let's keep it professional, all right?" My friends and family still won't let me live it down either. Now, whenever I bring up work, they all jokingly ask, "You're not sexting your boss again, right?" At the very least, I've learned to be way more careful about the texts I send. And let's just say, I now double-check every time I send a message to my girlfriend, too. TLDR, accidentally sexted my boss instead of my girlfriend because I was distracted and sent the wrong message. Ended up having to sign an apology letter and attend a professional communication workshop. Now I'm the office legend, for all the wrong reasons. TIFU by thinking I could fix my own plumbing problems with a YouTube tutorial. So, here's the backstory. I've always been pretty independent when it comes to DIY stuff. I know enough to get by, and if I don't know something, I have Google and YouTube to help. It started when I decided to fix a leaking pipe under my kitchen sink. It was a small drip that I could hear every time I entered the kitchen, and after a few weeks of ignoring it, I thought it was finally time to do something about it. Besides, how hard could it be to fix a leaky pipe, right? I'm not exactly the type to call a professional for small problems. I like to at least try to handle things myself first, and when it comes to plumbing, my dad had always said, it's just a few connections and some pipe tape. You'll be fine. So, armed with a little bit of confidence and a lot of ignorance, I set out to fix this leak. I got into my car, went to the local hardware store, and picked up some supplies, pipe tape, a wrench, and a small pipe repair kit that claimed to be for beginner DIYers. I was feeling pretty good about my choice in supplies. I had no idea how much I would come to regret that decision. Once I got back home, I started by shutting off the water supply. This part seemed easy enough, but of course, I still managed to mess it up. I didn't know where the shutoff valve was at first. After a few minutes of searching around and getting my hands all dirty from touching pipes that probably haven't been cleaned since the house was built in the 1970s, I finally found it. I twisted the valve, and everything went quiet. A good start. Then, I got under the sink and started looking at the leaking pipe. It wasn't a massive leak, just enough to be annoying, but I figured this would be a good test for my plumbing skills. I pulled out the wrench and started loosening the connections around the pipe. This is when the first major problem occurred. I wasn't quite sure how to remove the pipe, but I just kept twisting. After a few seconds, I realized the wrench wasn't doing much and that I might need something else. A little too late, I remembered the instructions in the repair kit, which I had neglected to look at. I gave the pipe a good twist, and sure enough, something snapped. The water in the pipes, which I had forgotten to fully drain, came gushing out in a big splash. It soaked my hands, my sleeves, and a good portion of the cabinets under the sink. Panic set in as water poured out like a mini waterfall. In my flustered state, I realized the leak wasn't the only problem. The entire pipe had come loose, and now there was water all over the floor. I frantically turned back to the shutoff valve, which I had definitely turned off, or so I thought. I twisted it again, just to be sure, and then checked under the sink. Nothing. The water was still coming out, and I could feel my heart racing. I did what any reasonable person would do at this point, I called my mom. Now, let me explain, my mom isn't a plumber, but she's very resourceful and knowledgeable when it comes to household problems. She doesn't live with me, but I knew I could count on her. The call went something like this: "Hey, Mom, I need some help with something." What happened? I tried fixing the kitchen sink, but now there's water everywhere, and I think I might have broken the pipe. You what? Did you turn off the water? Yeah, I thought so, but it's still leaking. Alright, first things first, are you sure you turned it off all the way? I'm going to go check. I ran back to the water valve, only to find that I had indeed not turned it off all the way. In my panic, I'd twisted it only part of the way. I twisted it fully, and the water stopped flowing. At least that was one disaster averted. But now, I had a new problem. I had no idea how to fix the pipe. I figured I could just buy some new parts from the hardware store, but then I remembered that it was a Sunday afternoon, and the store would be closed soon. I didn't want to leave everything in disarray, so I had no choice but to make do with what I had. I grabbed some old towels to soak up the water, but the damage was done. My kitchen floor was now covered in water, and the cabinet under the sink was getting soaked too. I figured I'd try to dry everything off and deal with the rest later. I grabbed the repair kit again and looked at the instructions more carefully this time, trying to follow each step. I applied the pipe tape as best as I could and tightened the connections with the wrench. It seemed like I had done it right. At this point, I felt pretty confident. Everything was tightened up, and I turned the water back on. I cautiously opened the faucet, half expecting another flood. But to my surprise, there was no water leaking from the pipe. It seemed to be holding up. I had done it. I fixed the sink. Or so I thought. A few hours later, I decided to check on the kitchen again, just to be sure. And that's when I noticed it. A faint drip. The leak was still there, just not as obvious. I must have missed something when tightening the pipe, and now I was back at square one. But the worst part? The sink was still functional, just with a slow, nagging leak. I couldn't really call a plumber at this point because I'd already made a mess of things, and I knew that they'd see the half-done job I had done and probably charge me an arm and a leg to fix it. So, what did I do? I lived with the leak for a while. Days turned into weeks, and every time I opened the cupboard under the sink, I saw the small, persistent drip. It was like a constant reminder of my DIY failure. Eventually, I did call a plumber, who came by and fixed it properly. He gave me a bit of a side-eye when he saw the mess under the sink, but he was nice enough to just get to work and sort things out. He said I'd made a good attempt, but he could tell that I was in over my head. Now, I just call the pros when something needs fixing. I'll stick to the easy stuff like assembling furniture and changing light bulbs. Plumbing is clearly not my thing. TLDR, tried fixing a leaky pipe under my kitchen sink with a DIY kit after watching a YouTube tutorial. Ended up flooding the kitchen, making a mess, and finally calling a plumber who fixed my mistakes. I've always been the type of person who's extremely careful about embarrassing situations. I mean, who isn't, right? The last thing you want is to make a fool of yourself in front of strangers, especially in a public setting. Well, apparently, all it takes is one bad decision to completely ruin your day. This happened to me a couple of weeks ago, and I still can't believe I made such a huge mistake. It started with a simple trip to the grocery store. Nothing too fancy, just a regular Sunday afternoon. I was running low on some essentials, so I threw on some comfortable clothes, grabbed my reusable shopping bags, and headed out. Nothing out of the ordinary. The store wasn't super busy, but it wasn't completely empty either. A few families, some older couples, and the usual Sunday shoppers were there. I picked up my usual items, bread, eggs, milk, and some random snacks I didn't really need. After I finished picking out all the items on my list, I made my way to the self-checkout lanes. There was a woman ahead of me, probably in her early 30s, and she seemed to be taking a bit longer than expected to finish. I wasn't in a huge rush, so I didn't mind. I casually looked around the store, scanning the aisles and maybe even doing a little window shopping for things I didn't need. When the woman finished, she walked off and I moved up to the machine. Now, usually, I'd be pretty smooth with the self-checkout. I've used them enough times that I'm pretty efficient with scanning, bagging, and paying. But today, I don't know what was wrong with me. I was in a bit of a rush, and I wasn't paying attention. I placed my first item, the bread, on the scale. It beeped, and I pressed the OK button. Easy enough. Next came the eggs, the milk, the chips, and everything else. But something felt off. The machine was constantly asking me to remove the item from the bagging area, even though I wasn't putting anything in the bagging area yet. It kept beeping at me, and I couldn't figure out what was wrong. After several attempts to fix it, I looked around nervously. I noticed that a small line was forming behind me, and people were starting to stare. A few people were trying to figure out what was going on, and I could hear some muttered frustrations. I felt a cold sweat forming on the back of my neck. At this point, I just wanted to get out of there without drawing any more attention to myself. I pressed the help button, and a store employee came over. "Hey, I'm having trouble with the machine. It keeps asking me to remove the items, but I haven't even put anything in the bagging area yet," I explained. The employee looked at the screen for a moment, and then his face shifted. "Did you scan everything?" he asked, his tone a bit confused. I looked down at the screen and noticed that there was one item left. My bottle of ketchup. The weird part was that it didn't beep or register when I placed it on the scanner, so I hadn't realized that it hadn't been scanned. Instead of just placing it back on the scanner, I grabbed it and tried scanning it again. The machine beeped once, and then the screen told me to remove the item from the bagging area again. The employee sighed and said, "Let me help you with that." At this point, I was mortified. Not only had I caused a scene in front of everyone, but now I was getting assistance from a store employee who was going to see just how clueless I was with technology. He got behind me and tried to scan the ketchup. But instead of the usual beep, the scanner started glitching. The whole machine froze. The screen went blank and the conveyor belt stopped moving. Great. Just great. Now there was no turning back. The employee tried restarting the system, but the whole lane seemed to be malfunctioning. He pressed the cancel transaction button, and instead of fixing the problem, the machine just froze up completely. People were starting to get more frustrated, and the line behind me was growing. It felt like everyone in the store was watching me, silently judging my incompetence with the self-checkout. After a few more minutes of waiting, another employee showed up. This one was a bit older, and she seemed less than thrilled to have to deal with the situation. She looked at me, then at the machine, then back at me. "You're not the first one to have trouble today," she muttered, mostly to herself. Then she turned to the other employee and said, "We'll have to move them to another lane." Before I could even apologize or say anything, they started taking my items off the machine one by one. They packed my groceries into the same bags I'd brought with me, and I was just standing there, watching it all unfold like it was happening to someone else. The whole time, I kept thinking about how much I just wanted to disappear. How could I screw up a simple trip to the grocery store like this? Once my groceries were bagged and moved to the next self-checkout, I had to scan everything again, starting from scratch. I tried to ignore the people behind me, but I could feel their eyes burning into my back. The older employee watched me closely, making sure I didn't screw up again. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I finished scanning everything. The total appeared on the screen, and I rushed to pay. As I was about to swipe my card, I saw that the employee was smiling at me. I thought it was a sarcastic smile at first, but she said, "You're good to go. Have a nice day." I grabbed my bags and walked out of the store, trying my best to keep my head down and not make eye contact with anyone. I could still feel the eyes of everyone who had been waiting in line behind me burning into me, and I knew that I would forever be known as the guy who broke the self-checkout machine in front of an entire grocery store. When I got home, I texted my best friend about the whole ordeal. He was kind enough to laugh at me and tell me it wasn't that big of a deal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I had somehow let everyone down. Every time I pass that grocery store now, I make sure to check and see if the same employee is there. If she is, I quickly turn around and find another store to go to. The shame still lingers, and I'm honestly scared that one day, I'll run into someone from that line who will recognize me as the self-checkout disaster guy. It's funny how something as simple as a grocery run can go so wrong. But hey, lesson learned. Never trust self-checkouts on a Sunday afternoon when the store is busy. And always double-check your items before you walk away from the machine. Never again. TIFU by accidentally starting a fire in my kitchen while trying to impress my friends with my cooking skills. So, let me set the scene for you. I've always been the go-to guy when it comes to casual get-togethers with my friends. I'm the one who usually hosts, makes sure everyone is well-fed, and keeps the good vibes flowing. But there's always been one area where I've been a bit of a show-off, cooking. It's not that I'm some kind of Gordon Ramsay in the kitchen, but I like to think of myself as a decent home cook. I've had a couple of successful dinner parties where I whipped up some pretty decent meals, and I wanted to keep up that streak. A few days ago, a small group of friends came over to hang out and catch up. I decided this time I was going to go all out. No more frozen pizza or microwaved snacks. I was going to cook something from scratch that would blow everyone away. I settled on something I thought was relatively simple yet impressive, beef Wellington. It's a classic, right? Elegant, complicated enough to show off a little bit of skill, but not so advanced that I'd embarrass myself entirely. I spent the whole day prepping, making sure I had everything perfect, from the puff pastry to the mushrooms, the prosciutto, and the beef tenderloin. I even spent extra time watching YouTube videos to make sure I didn't mess it up. So, the big night arrives, and my friends are all excited. I've got my apron on, the kitchen is buzzing with activity, and I'm feeling like a professional chef in a high-end restaurant. The thing is, as much as I pride myself on my cooking, I get really impatient. I hate waiting. So, when it came to searing the beef before wrapping it in puff pastry, I decided I was going to rush things a little. Why take the usual 4 to 5 minutes per side on medium-high heat when I could crank the burner up to high and get it done in half the time, right? Mistake number 1. The moment the beef hit the pan, I could see the smoke rising. It wasn't the light, aromatic smoke I'd seen in cooking videos. No, this was thick, gray, angry smoke that instantly made the kitchen feel like a sauna. I immediately lowered the heat, but the damage was done. The beef was searing so quickly that the oil in the pan started splattering everywhere, and I was too focused on the beef to notice that the oil was splattering onto the stove top. But I wasn't ready to throw in the towel. This was supposed to be my moment, so I quickly wiped down the stove with a rag while still trying to manage the searing beef. The rag I used, however, had a small amount of dish soap on it from when I had previously cleaned the counters. So, of course, when I wiped down the stove, the rag caught fire from the hot burner. Mistake number 2. At first, I didn't notice the flames at all. I thought the rag was just a little damp. But then, I started to smell something, a mixture of burning fabric and what I can only describe as the scent of regret. I looked down, and my rag was fully engulfed in flames. Panic hit me like a freight train. I didn't want to shout for help because that would have been an admission of failure. So, I did what any responsible adult would do, I tried to blow it out. But that just made the flames flare up even more. I then grabbed the closest thing to me, which was a large pot lid, and tried to smother the flames. This only worked to a point, as the fire kept spreading, and I could feel the heat radiating toward me. Now, my friends were starting to hear the commotion from the living room. The smell of burnt fabric had started to spread, and they began poking their heads into the kitchen, asking if I was okay. In my panic, I wasn't able to articulate the fact that I was losing control of the situation. I just kept swatting at the flames with the pot lid, trying to keep it from spreading further. But at that point, it was too late. The rag was no longer the problem. The flames had spread to the edge of the counter, and a nearby oven mitt, another potential source of my eventual shame, caught fire as well. By now, the entire kitchen was beginning to fill with smoke, and the fire alarms started going off, creating a soundtrack to my downfall. My friends were fully in the kitchen at this point, standing there frozen, watching me struggle to keep my cool. One of them grabbed the fire extinguisher off the wall and sprayed it all over the stove, putting out the flames but also coating the entire kitchen in a fine layer of white powder. In the end, the beef Wellington was ruined, the kitchen was a disaster, and I was mortified. I had planned on impressing everyone with my culinary skills, but instead, I had managed to nearly set the house on fire. As I stood there covered in fire extinguisher residue, I realized that the entire evening had gone from what was supposed to be an elegant dinner to a complete disaster. In the aftermath, we ended up ordering takeout from a local pizza place, and I couldn't stop laughing at myself. My friends, of course, never let me live it down. Every time I host a gathering now, they remind me about the great fire of beef Wellington. I'm still friends with all of them, but I think they'll always remember the night I almost burned my house down trying to cook a fancy meal. Lesson learned, maybe start with something simpler, like pasta. Also, don't rush your cooking, and for the love of all that is good, check the rag for any remnants of dish soap before using it to clean anything near fire. #hashtag fire safety hashtag culinary disaster hashtag not a show off anymore. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.